Hi Muglets, I've gotten a lot of requests to take a look at the GameSpot interview with Genshin. I've seen a snippet or two while browsing through Reddit, but I wanted to take a look at the whole thing and give my opinions on it, because as far as Genshin is concerned, it's kind of rare we get an insight into how they think and how they're going to progress through things. So let's just go ahead and jump into it. So the first question here, versions 3 and 3.1 are expected to be 1 week shorter than usual. In the future, will you be continuing with these shortened? I'm pretty sure they already said they would. Or should players expect update releases to return to their former pace? And here they essentially say, yes, it'll stay 5 weeks per update, but it won't make the content worse than it was before. Yes, and then here, this is the question I actually saw, which is probably the most important one, honestly. Currently, the Spiral Abyss is the only true in-game content for players at high adventure ranks. Are there any plans to release new permanent in-game content in the same vein as the Spiral Abyss? And this basically boils down to no. Their main reasoning is it might end up creating excessive anxiety for our players. Not everyone is interested in Misc Reef. And I saw, I think in one of the Reddit comments, that there is a pretty low percentage of players that even attempt to do Spiral Abyss. And that essentially says the majority of players are quite casual. As far as I remember, it was like 40% of players don't even bother trying Spiral Abyss. I mean, a lot of those could just be early game players, you know. Genshin is still getting a lot of new players, and some of them might only play a week or 2 weeks or something and, you know, never get to the part of grinding Spiral Abyss. So I don't know how useful that statistic is, and the actual value of these players that aren't doing Spiral Abyss. I would say a lot of the veteran players spend money in the game and they're interested in seeing it develop further. I mean, I'm one of them, but I do kind of see where they're coming from, this anxiety. I mean, even me as more of a non-casual player, I do have some anxiety here and there, like, oh man, Abyss is gonna reset soon. But you know, they could have a permanent thing without a timer on it. What's wrong with that? Unless they feel that players think, oh, well, there is this content that exists, and you know, my party isn't strong enough to do it, and that sucks. Maybe that's the reasoning, I don't know. But some kind of endless or almost endless floors content without a weekly or monthly or bi-monthly whatever reset, it's just there and you go as high as you can. And you know, you get some small rewards per floor completed or whatever. I think for new players, old players, free to plays, whales, whatever, I think that would add a lot of value. You get a new character, you raise them, you want to see, hey, maybe I can beat that floor I was stuck on, and hey, maybe you can do it. The current Spiral Abyss is kind of like that for, you know, mid to early late game players, but for the longtime veterans, even a lot of the free to play veterans can get through Abyss. It's just not that satisfying. So I think that's something they could consider. They do mention their Genius Invocation trading card game, which will be a permanent thing, I guess, but it seems more like a mini game, a side thing, not something you're taking the characters you've worked on and built and raised into some content where you can really test their strength. Spiral Abyss isn't really enough after 2 years. So I spent a lot of time on this question because I think it's probably going to be one of the most important ones here. There are some more things I could say, but it is a little futile at the end of the day. In this next question, they're asking about balance. As newer characters come in, replacing the older characters, are the older ones going to get buffed or changed somehow to keep them viable? And before I read their response to this, I want to say that Genshin is one of the best when it comes to this, in my opinion. I've played a lot of gacha games in the past, and Genshin is one of the few where most of their older characters still feel viable 2 years later. Yeah, sure, some of the standard banners, like maybe Kaching, Diluc, whatever, they're outclassed by others in the meantime, but not only are they still usable, but even the lower rarity 4 stars are still usable. Some of them, like Bennett, Xingqiu, Fischl, Beidou, there's tons of these old 4 stars that are still preferred in a team over newer 4 stars or even newer 5 stars. But their response is, if a character is only assessed by a single dimension of numerical strength, power creep could indeed be an issue. However, in Genshin Impact, the rules of gameplay are more impactful than how strong a character is. Therefore, new battlegrounds, new challenge levels, or even new team builds all have potential to bring new life to existing content. I think that was a good response, honestly. It's a little bit vague, but they're essentially saying, in the right scenario, all characters can be useful. I don't know if that's strictly true. I think the main thing that is true here is that the team builds, because depending on what team you're going for and what roles you need to fill in, most characters do have a spot. And again, I think that's something they've been really good with when it comes to balance and power creep and such like that. This next question is pretty interesting as well. They're essentially asking about the Dendro Reactions, how there's none for Geo. There's also none with Cryo, but they don't mention that. And they basically say no plans. And the reasoning for that is because it might make it too complex if literally everything can react with everything else, which, I mean, before Dendro, that was kind of the case. I mean, I haven't really experimented with Geo and Dendro because why would I? But they could at least have a little Dendro crystal pop out, like crystallize. That happens with every other element. I don't see how that would make it more complex necessarily. As far as cryo is concerned, I guess I get it. The current Dendro reactions are already somewhat complex, more complex than most of the other reactions. Oh yeah, I haven't read the response to this question yet, but it was something I kind of saw a snippet of. They're essentially asking if we're going to see a resin cap increase or a quicker regeneration rate. They don't specifically say no, but they also don't say yes, which basically means no. But yeah, they basically say there's other ways to get these materials that you get by using resin. So yeah, that's just what they say. I mean, so obviously that's quite disappointing. We can't really expect to see a higher cap. I think that would be more important than a quicker regeneration rate, at least for the more veteran players. I mean, I am kind of a little bit biased because I am one of these veteran players that have been playing for 2 years. But how it is now, resin refills in under 24 hours. If they bumped it up to at least 180 resin, I think that'd be around 24 hours then. Maybe just bump it up to 200. So it would be kind of possible to have one Genshin session a day without losing resin. That's one of the things that causes me anxiety. Oh, am I full? Has it been 20 hours since I used every single resin I had? You know, obviously they want to encourage people to log in more than once a day to spend their resin or whatever, and that's necessary as it currently is, but I don't know. I think that, if anything, would cause more anxiety than having an extra piece of in-game content, you know? This one is about old story quests. It doesn't seem that interesting to me personally, but it's basically asking if old story stuff can be replayed by newer players because they missed something important. Specifically talking about Summertime Odyssey, as this was a limited time event. And there's kind of some backstory stuff with Mona and Fischl, as well as some Scaramouche stuff with the Mondstadt event. And they say they are aware of the issue and looking into solutions for it. They do say the stories from limited time events won't become barriers to understanding Archon quests, which are like the main story, which is probably true, but you know, there are some interesting sort of contexts, I would say, in some of these limited time events from stories, kind of like character development in a way, I suppose, which you don't necessarily need, but it would be nice to have the option, yeah. In the next question, they're asking about costumes for the main character, the Traveler. I guess specifically one for each region, you know, that kind of stylizes the regions of Teyvat. They basically say, cool idea, bro, maybe we'll do it. In a similar vein, the Traveler can wear some accessories and such during some limited time things, but they're not permanent, and they're asking if they will be permanent. And their response is, yeah, maybe, we'll think about it. Then they're talking about crossovers or collabs, since they had that with Honkai Impact with Kaching and Fischl, and if they would consider doing the reverse, bringing some Genshin characters into Honkai, and their response is essentially, maybe, but probably not. So that was the Genshin interview. Honestly, I'm left a little bit more disappointed than I thought I would be. Like I said, I did read some bits and pieces, but not the full scope of it, obviously. There are other things I would love to see in Genshin that weren't even mentioned here, like character loadouts. One of the things that really keeps me from fully enjoying the game at the moment is having to mess with everyone's gear all the time, which I guess is partially my problem, my fault, because I raise every single character and I don't have enough artifacts and weapons to go around to make them all good. So having something where I can set them up to be as good as they can be and press a button so they're locked in, or just do that for an entire team, that would be awesome as well. That would be so cool, dude. My life would be so easy. Spend a couple hours like making 5 different teams, and then you can just swap to them and everything is where it should be. I know this is probably a pretty niche problem. Most people don't have 50 raised characters, but that's just something I would have liked to see at least maybe discussed. It doesn't have to be that complex either, just like a swap over of wherever the artifacts and weapons are. It just swaps over to them with a click of the button, so that when I want to try a new team and I'm, you know, stealing bits and pieces of gear from all my other characters, when I want to go use that character again, it's just, and then it's done, you know? That would be so awesome. Honestly, most of the reasons I'm not doing a lot of challenge content anymore is because I know everything gets messed up and it's just going to be a big headache. But yeah, the main takeaways, probably no new in-game content, no plans for them to do anything with the current resin system, even some small changes like they've already done. I think they increased it already from something under 160 to 160, and then they made the condensed. So they have been doing small things, which definitely have made it better. I don't want to say they've completely ignored it. Condensed resin was kind of a game changer. It made it a lot more playable so that instead of, you know, logging on and having to run some domains or spend your resin, you could just make a couple condensed and you're okay. In regards to the resin system, the only thing I would be so happy about is if they just bumped it up to 180 or even 200. Just make it a nice even 200. No pressure. You can have a certain time you play Genshin every day. You could make it into a routine, like this is my Genshin time or whatever, you know. Right now it feels messy, like, oh, I'm playing Genshin at 5. today and I used all my resin, but then it's going to be full at like 1 p.m. tomorrow. It's just weird. But yeah, make sure to tell me what you think in the comments down below. Dropping a like or subscribing to the channel if you enjoyed this video is always greatly appreciated as well. Thanks, as always, for watching, and until next time.